Hello, this is Dr Jess Wade and I'm a physicist at Imperial College London, and I'm also by night a big Wikipedia editor, and you are listening to the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the University of Liverpool Academy's Developing Practice podcast. Today, myself, Alex Owen, academic developer, and Matt Davis, organisational developer, sat down with Dr Jess Wade. We had a really interesting conversation about championing equality for underrepresented groups and the importance of raising the profile of others. We hope you enjoy our chat.
Great, Jess, we're really pleased to be speaking to you today. I believe you're visiting the university because you're giving a lecture as part of the Women in Science and Engineering lecture series, which is great, but we've managed to pinch a little bit of your time before you do that to catch up. So thanks for meeting with us. Before we get started, it would be great just to hear a little bit of your background in terms of kind of where you are now and also how you've got to that point.
Sure, so I am a physics postdoc now, actually working a lot with chemists. I look at new materials for light-emitting diodes at Imperial College, and in October I'm going to be starting a new job in the materials department, so in engineering, kind of shifting the focus of my research a little bit and also moving from natural sciences to engineering, which feels really big for me but doesn't seem very big to people from the outside world. How I got here was I obviously loved science and maths at high school. I also really enjoyed art, and I think that's been something that's been really important to me in all of the research I've done in the kind of communication and public engagement I've done as well. So after school, I went to art school for a year and then went to study physics. And I think I realised when I got to university to study physics just how unfair it was that I had had all of these opportunities. You know, I'd grown up in a household where both of my parents were doctors. I'd had incredible teachers all the way through high school who really taught me that, you know, chemistry was super exciting, physics was super exciting, maths was something much more than just a few rearranging equations that you did in year 9. And I think I realised how privileged I was when I got to university. You know, it's quite hard to see that when you're in it. And then I got to university and realised that not everyone had that opportunity. So I really started trying to do things to change that and to make more people realise that physics was an incredibly important and fun subject to study. And so I was doing that kind of a little bit during my undergraduate, and then had never really thought about having an academic career. And then I just found myself in this research group of people who I thought were super exciting and, you know, like no one I'd ever met before, and always asking questions. And I really loved that. And I decided to stay through a PhD, and then hadn't really planned doing a postdoc. I was quite, you know, very frustrated. And then I had a Viva, my kind of end of PhD exam was with 2 amazing examiners, both of whom made me want to stay in academia and keep researching. So there's been kind of no plan to my academic career, but I found things that I find really, really fascinating and questions that I want to keep working on. You know, I want to find out the answers to them. I don't want to leave someone else to do it. So that's kept me in academia.
Wonderful. My background's education, so it's lovely to hear the really positive experience of education that you've had. Just really picking up on what you said there about the impact of the teachers on your life, and I guess particularly as a female in science, they've been a real inspiration to you. What more can we do to really inspire people to do what you're doing? Yeah, that's exciting.
I completely agree with you. I think as a society we don't value teachers enough or education enough. Every time I meet a successful woman physicist, or I write about them because I write a lot of biographies of women scientists, you find they had that inspirational teacher early in their childhood. Either it was their parents, usually their dad was an engineer, or it was a teacher, or both sometimes.
Okay.
And I think that actually we need to start celebrating that more, talking about it more. You know, when we have opportunities, when scientists do interviews, they should always credit and celebrate their teachers. But also society needs to financially recognise their efforts and also think about how we restructure schools, because at the moment we have some really sensational science teachers who are really stopped from teaching the science that they love and that they're extraordinarily good at, and put into doing kind of admin roles and staying up doing all of these ridiculous jobs. And it's tiring and kind of demoralising. So you have a really high staff turnover. We have a really hard time attracting really skilled graduates to go into teaching. So in the UK, we have a huge shortage of specialist maths teachers. Physics teachers is particularly in deficit, and also computer science teachers. And I think it's going to get worse with Brexit and various other things. So I really think if we're serious and committed as a whole society to try and tackle gender inequality, ethnicity inequality, we're going to have to think about where in the country we have these great teachers and how we train them and how we recognise their work. Because, as you said, teachers are so important, and at the moment we don't value it enough.
Yeah, wonderful. And then I guess culture's shifting a little bit in terms of the expectation around girls and science, and that girls should be engaged in science at high school just as much as boys should. What can we do around that to really open up that opportunity and see it as something of a realistic opportunity for girls to access higher education in terms of the sciences?
I think that actually at undergraduate level, girls do pretty much the same subjects that they do in A level as they do in university.
Right, okay.
So we have just over 50%, about 55% of A level biology students are young women, about half of chemistry A level students are young women, and about 20 to 25% of A level physics students are young women. And it's pretty much the same at university.
Okay.
And what I think is really sad is it means that these subjects are never taken by people just as general interest subjects.
Mm-hmm.
We have set up an education system in the UK where you choose 3 A-levels. So at the age of 15, 16, you choose the 3 subjects that are really going to define you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And no one can choose something like physics just because they're interested in it. You don't get English graduates and psychology graduates and modern language graduates who just think, oh, I'm really interested in cosmology, I'm going to study that. And I think that's a detriment to society.
Absolutely agree with you. So my daughter, she is just gone into year 10. Actually at year 9 now they choose their GCSE subjects, so they do 3 years on GCSE. And the narrowing of the curriculum, when they're going into year 9 is crazy. She's not great at art and drama, but actually I was saying try and take some of those subjects for your interest. But actually, because she's forced to narrow the curriculum, you rule out certain subjects just for the joy of studying those subjects.
And I think that's really sad. I think that it happens a lot when teachers' biases influence young people as well.
Yeah.
So if a teacher is biased against young women taking science or non-white people taking science, then that can influence the advice that they give to people in year 9. And when you're in year 9, you listen to what the adults say, and you listen to what your parents say and what your teachers say. And if your parents have never met or interacted with a physicist or engineer, which is probably quite likely, or don't know they have because people may not talk about what they do or how they use their skills at work, and if your teachers have this kind of bias, not only against particular protected characteristics, but also they're biased themselves, because if the majority of physics teachers have never had formal training in physics, we have a huge gap in that, then they're against the subject. I can remember so many times when I've met groups of teachers and they've been terrified to teach physics, or they're at these kind of training days because they hate it. Mm-hmm. And if you have that kind of teacher giving advice, even with the best of intentions, it's going to come out kind of skewed and shifted.
You're not going to inspire people, are you?
Exactly. So we have a huge problem because we have super able girls. We have really able people from all different kinds of backgrounds, and they're not getting the right advice. And they're lacking in confidence a little bit because society's telling them, wear pink, read these stupid books, buy these stupid things. We're really stereotyping people from early on. Then they go to get advice from people who are also affected by these stereotypes. And then physics and engineering and further maths suffer because of it. So I think that what we need to do is better value our teachers, but also give really strategic career advice and say, look at these, this phenomenal class of young women astronauts. Look at something like the movie Hidden Figures. Look at these things, but think about when you're 14, 15, the choices you have to make for GCSE and then the choices you have to make to A-level to do it. Because we don't give any wiggle room for people to change their mind later on.
Yeah, brilliant. Hidden Figures, we've just watched that as a family. We loved it.
I love it.
Really
I think
good.
it was... So have you seen it?
I've not seen it yet.
It's just perfect. It's like Hollywood does science education. We've been trying so hard in the UK and all of these kind of half-hearted ad campaigns and toys and things like that. And ultimately, I think they'll never get the attention of young people because there's, young people now are way slicker than everything that we can package up and sell them. But Hollywood... Hidden Figures particularly was so smooth, so perfectly cast, so expensively and perfectly made. I think I'll be surprised if not everyone watching it wants to become a mathematician or an engineer.
That's on my watch list now for this weekend.
It's great, and it generates conversation. So we watched it. I've got a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I could hear the 12-year-old in the back of the car when we were doing gymnastics run the other day telling her friends. So then we invited her friends over and we had a movie night and we watched it again because it really inspired her. To think about opportunities that, as you say, culture probably hadn't even opened up to her and weren't on her radar.
Yeah, and I think it does another really great job because it makes science and engineering look really cool. And while you're watching it and thinking, I'd like to work for NASA, I'd like to do this and that, you kind of get this education in racial injustice as well.
Yeah.
And I think that is something really important, the conversations we have with young people now around that, because everything politically is getting so polarised all over the world. And I think seeing how it has affected people in the past is a really good way to teach young people about what's happening in the present.
Absolutely.
It's great to hear you talking about some of these things because it's very clear that it's really important to you and you're really passionate about the subject. I was just doing some background research just before we put this podcast together, and I come across Sarah Sanford, gender equality expert, who talked about opportunities for women over the last 50 years have vastly increased. But what she's saying is in the last decade, progress has stalled. And she also cites that some experts predicted that in the year 2059 was when they expected the wage gap to close, but they've revised that recently, and now they're saying that their expectation is that the gap will close in 2119, which is 99 years away. What do you think about that?
I think that the gender pay gap is a really, really difficult thing that we need to address quite fast. We have an ethnicity pay gap as well, and we probably have a pay gap about different people with different disabilities or with different learning abilities and styles. And I think that all of those things come from having really non-transparent structures within the workplace. It's very unclear who gets paid what from in an academic department or at different levels. I think that, again, it comes back to what we value in society. So if we really value teaching, if we really value caring responsibilities, if we really value the kind of work that women are overrepresented in, like nursing and things like that, then if we paid them more, we'd have a more gender equal society, right? We'd have people with a much, much smaller pay gap. So I think that if society is realistic about recognising the things that people contribute to it and all the things people contribute to it, similarly to how university departments need to get better at looking at all of the things that women and minoritized faculty have to do but don't get paid for or recognised for, then I think the gender pay gap would go away. It's because we don't talk about it and we don't recognise the work that women do as being as important as the work that men have historically done. But I do agree. I think that there's a lot of talk in the past kind of 5-10 years about gender equality. You hear it everywhere. You have seminar series like the one I'm speaking at today. You have all of this events, conferences, workshops, things you can buy, books you can buy. You can go into a bookshop and you can buy all of these different books on it. There's endless research studies, but nothing really changes. And I think that's why, for me, that was a big part of why I started editing Wikipedia, because I was doing more and more of this gender equality and campaigning and not seeing anything change. The statistics on who studies what at A-level, the statistics on how many women professors there are in all of these different places, they haven't shifted for 10, 20 years. So we really need to look at ourselves as a society and see what we can actually learn and what we need to change. And I don't think people are being very critical in the way they approach that.
So talk to us a little bit about the work you've done with Wikipedia in particular. So my understanding is that you're trying to raise the profile of colleagues, like female colleagues or LGBTQ colleagues or BAME colleagues by updating Wikipedia and kind of adding their profiles to that platform. Why are you specifically using that mode, and how what kind of impact are you having?
So I should start off by saying they're not colleagues. You're not allowed to write about people you know on Wikipedia, so you can't know them, be related to them, or be paid by them.
Sure.
Because that could influence how you write.
That makes sense.
It's a completely neutral form and tone you have to take. So I think Wikipedia is phenomenally important. I learned about how to edit it a couple of years ago, and obviously all of us use it in our everyday lives. and it is used so much more than I'd really appreciated. So by journalists, by people in the media who are putting together experts for particular topics.
And also, I guess, I was exactly going to say, my kids use Wikipedia all the time.
Yeah, and massively in classrooms. You know, in science, in universities, in political campaigning, it's used. So Wikipedia is a very important platform, not only in what we see and how we use it directly, but also in the indirect ways. So it tells all the information to Home Assistant, so Siri and Amazon Alexa and all of those. If you have those in your houses and you ask a question of them, they go to Wikipedia for the information. So it's really important in how we access information now, and it's obviously phenomenally successful in giving open access, providing knowledge to people all over the world for free, and really, really respectable and credited knowledge. You know, you can't put a fact on Wikipedia without having a really, really credible reference to back whatever you're saying up. And so I think it's incredibly powerful. The problem with Wikipedia is the majority of editors are from a particular group. About 90% of them are men, and about half of those live in North America.
Right.
And they're pretty much all white. So we have a really biased view of the world and of the people who've contributed to making our world the way that it is today. And as a result of that, on English-speaking Wikipedia, about 18%, so just less than 1 in 5 of the biographies are about women. And that means when your kids are on it, when we're on it in university lecture theatres, when journalists are using it, they're getting a really skewed view of who's done what in the world and who does what in the world. And the reason I think it's so important to edit and to improve the representation of women and people of colour and LGBTQ plus scientists is because I really like the idea that someone's just on there because they're doing their homework, looking up climate change or looking up, you know, coronavirus, and then they're clicking through all the different links on it, and then they find their way to the profile of a woman or a black engineer or something like that. Like, you don't go to them and shove it in their face and make it really non-subtle. They're finding information kind of stealthily. They're finding it because they're interested in a topic. And hey, here's a woman who grew up in a similar part of Liverpool who's really interested in climate change. You know, you find out about it because they're interested in what you're interested in. It feels a lot more natural and honest to me than here's a book of 50 women scientists, find the one that looks most like you and impresses you most. I love the idea that you're fascinated by learning and information, and then you find it like that.
Lovely. And do you get to see any of the metrics in terms of the pages that you've edited? Can you see exactly what you're describing there, the click-throughs and people accessing that information?
So if people are interested who are listening in editing Wikipedia, either on the contributing content side or on the data analysis side, you get all the data from Wikipedia completely for free. It's probably nothing like any other platform you've ever put information onto. So you can find out who's looking at your pages, when they're looking at them, how often they've been looked at over an hour, over a day, over a week. You can see when people have particular studies coming out, or they've published a book, or they've appeared on the radio, how many more times people are talking about that page. You can start to see how it's linked from different parts of Wikipedia. So just as you said, the really interesting thing with Wikipedia is no one really starts off and goes directly to the page, particularly pages about people. They'll start on the page about something else. They'll start on the Wikipedia page about philosophy and then jump, they'll click a link and they'll get into this half an hour of just learning great facts. And I love that. And you can get all of that information. You can also be able to track everything you've done. So you really get a nice history of what you've contributed. And I guess from my kind of cynicism of how we really badly spend money on outreach and engagement, Wikipedia is completely free to edit, and it's free to edit in 300 different languages and accessed by 32 million people a day. So if you put stuff on Wikipedia, people really, really read it. And I think it's just a phenomenal tool for science communication or engagement, or in trying to remedy this underrepresentation of women scientists on the general internet and elsewhere.
Lovely.
That's really interesting. I've never thought of that before. When you sit and read Wikipedia, you're in a completely different mindset than you are when you're reading something else. If, let's say, for example, a news article, you're in a completely different
you just
place.
think, I'm going to learn something.
Yeah,
you don't
do.
think they're trying to teach me something.
Yeah,
you
prepare
think
for
you're
it
directing it. Like, you read it and you choose what you want to read next. It's not the news that's telling you something that you could think they've got this agenda. Either way, it's something that has to be, from the way you write it and the way it's rigorously checked by other editors, has to be incredibly neutral and impartial. You have to say just what's happened and when it happened. You can't put, this was a good thing to do or a bad thing to do. You can't put any of your own opinion into a Wikipedia article, which means that it's harder to write at first, and it means that it's really hard to write when you're writing about people that you really respect, because you can't say this is a really fantastic person or this is a pioneer or a game. You can't do that, but it means that actually when you're reading it, you can reflect upon how impressive these people must have been to achieve what they did when they did in the situation they did, even without all of the kind of adjectives to describe how great they are.
Brilliant. So this work with Wikipedia and generating the conversation and the interest around underrepresented groups on Wikipedia is something that you're doing alongside your work as a postdoc at Imperial. What else are you doing to kind of generate that conversation and that awareness?
Yeah, I think the Wikipedia editing is really fun. It's kind of my night job and my weekend job, because it takes over all your time, not only editing but responding to emails about it and talking about it, and I find it really exciting, and I don't think I'll stop because I keep learning so much. Part of it is this global mission, and we need to get better at celebrating people, and the other part is just I really like learning facts, so that's really fun. The other thing that I'm really trying to do in a big way this year is to get people recognized by nominating them for awards or fellowships, more so talking about people whenever I have the opportunity and wherever I am, but really thinking strategically. When we have people being promoted for professor, when we have people who are appearing on news channels and radio channels, they're there because they've had some recognition or honour at some stage. People have been speaking about them. And actually, when you look at the lists of who wins what from universities, from learned societies, from different funding bodies, it's usually pretty successful white men who win more awards to become even more successful white men. So something that I've been trying to do for the past year, and alongside the Wikipedia work, is think who would be really good to nominate for what, and then to nominate them for those prizes. So and everyone can do that, right? You don't have to commit to writing a full Wikipedia page, but when the University of Liverpool staff awards come up, or when you see the Royal Society of Chemistry have this deadline, think about someone who's from a minoritized group in science and nominate them, because everyone wants to award things to people from the underrepresented groups, but because they're not nominated, they don't have that opportunity to do it. So people in senior leadership, people at journals are really keen on making these changes happen, but we have to be the kind of activists to push them in the right direction.
Yeah, we've got to do it from within.
That's a brilliant challenge, isn't it? That's something we could take away in terms of thinking about how we can access those awards, even here at our institution, but more widely as well.
There's the American Geophysical Union put a kind of note on their awards and fellowships platform where you went to make nominations, saying please be mindful of equality or diversity. Just some really simple sentence, and after having that up, they noticed a change in the number of women who were nominated for fellow. So it wasn't like it wasn't explicit, it wasn't emailing people. They also have a task force to put together packages to nominate really, really underrepresented groups for really senior prizes. But this was just a kind of think about it, remember that this is important, and people have really changed. So I think people just need that kind of really gentle nudge in the right direction.
Fantastic.
I love a gentle nudge. Just moving on ever so slightly, there's obviously still a significant underrepresentation of women in some STEM subjects. What do you think we can do to address that? Does that start at school, or is it more around the positive action in terms of recruitment in higher education? What do you think?
I think it's probably both. I think it definitely starts in school, because the subjects that are most affected by the underrepresentation of women, so computing, engineering and physics, all start when you're 15, 16. If we have 1 in 5 A-level students for physics are girls, it's 1 in 10 for computer science. And then when you get to university, it just mirrors that. And when you get to professor level, actually the representation of women in all disciplines decreases. It's not just physics. So part of it is school, but a lot more of it is probably the culture that we have within academia. And some of it is what we've discussed, so kind of recognizing what people have done and celebrating and honoring it. Other things that are just so obvious, I don't know why we don't do them all the time. So things like nurseries on campus, and opportunities for women to come back, or people to come back if they've taken time out for caring. Whether that's elderly parents, which we're going to have to do more and more in future generations, or whether that's time out to look after children, or even time out in industry. We still have really weird old-fashioned mechanisms to get people back into universities, and I don't know why you wouldn't change that. But I think the biggest kind of most overarching one, and it recognises all of this, is that we as a general public and universities need to get better remembering that science is done by teams. And actually, when you apply for an award or a big fund, it should go to the team of people who are doing it. It doesn't have to be that one kind of hero at the top. If instead we awarded research money to teams, so to groups of PIs or something like that, then you could imagine situations where some took time out for maternity leave, perhaps one gets in trouble, something like that. The research and the group goes on. And actually it's much more realistic of how we do science. You know, when I think about the research groups that I've been lucky enough to work in, it's completely a team game. It's led by, you know, usually one or two academics. We've got a bunch of people lower down who make the science happen, and PhD students who help us do the research. But I think that actually that movement to recognising, you know, the Nobel Prize is so old-fashioned and prosaic, and the reason they seem so old-fashioned is because they award a prize for huge world effort of research to 3 people, and that's what we do all the time with funding. So we need to get better at recognising science is done by teams of people.
So a recent survey in the tech industry found that women are leaving the industry at 45% higher rates than men, and the reason that is largely down to the culture.
I completely agree. I think science is very similar to tech, although I do think in science, I think in tech you have more of and I'm maybe completely mistaken, but I think you have more collective action. You know, people come together, people are at similar levels and similar experiences. When there's a group of women all working at one of these huge tech companies, they can come together and talk about it. In universities, you have this isolation and this, you know, you've got one PI leading 2, 3, 4 students. You've got a real hesitancy to come forward and to say anything because, you know, either finishing your PhD or finishing your postdoc, you've just got to get through and do it.
Yeah.
How many PhD students I've spoken to all over the world who just want to finish their PhD? They don't want to cause trouble. They don't want to talk about their PI. And I think it's different out of academia. I think completely there are issues, similar issues, but they're not the same because we have this way of setting up people to be in charge of people without giving them any training to be in charge of people. And I think there's a bit more of appreciation of human and interpersonal skills outside of academia. But, you know, we train academics, science and engineering academics, to be scientists and engineers, and then suddenly turn them into managers and admin people. And they don't have, you know, and teachers, and they don't have the time that they should have the training to do that. So it's not surprising that not everyone's brilliant at it. But I do think this kind of whisper networks and silence within academia is different to different disciplines, even if people are just as badly behaved.
So talking about recognition, it's lovely that you've been recognised in lots of ways. I've got a lovely long list here in front of me, which I won't embarrass you and read out. But I'm just going to pull out one, that you received the British Empire Medal in 2019 in the Birthday Honours List for service to gender diversity in science. But reflecting on some of the recognition that you've had and kind of applying that to what you've just said about raising the profile of others, is there any aspect of the recognition that you've had that you'd like to highlight to us? And just in terms of kind of waving that flag for equality and raising the profile of people from underrepresented groups.
Yeah, I'll talk about the medal because it's the funniest story by far. So the letter for the British Empire Medal came to my family home, and my parents are both medical doctors who are both phenomenal champions for society. My mum's a psychiatrist and is in student mental health now, which is obviously phenomenally important. And my dad is a neurologist who is, you know, should be retired, but still sees 60 patients a day. So when the letter came to our house, it was addressed to Dr J Wade, and obviously my dad thought it was for him.
Oh.
He's also Dr J Wade. So I was like, Dad, there's something for you. And then he started reading it, and it was like,
brilliant.
Dear Madam, and he was like, oh, it must be for Charlotte, who's my mother. And then we were like, oh, it's for Jess. So really that was hilarious. And actually I think that award, that recognition was brilliant because the other people who won it were all such phenomenal heroes for the United Kingdom. You know, people who got it for services for Buddhism. One gentleman who got it for services to bell ringing in his local church and had rung it every day. He was 100 and had rung it every day other than when he was serving in the World Wars. And the usual celebration of people who do things around diversity or equality is heard and celebrated and recognised a lot by other people who do diversity and equality work. So when you have awards for it, other people who champion you and say that's brilliant, or other people who value it. And something about getting something in the Queen's Birthday Honours, or something about going to the Tower of London to collect it, means a lot more people hear about what you do. You know, I got to chat with all of these phenomenal people from across the UK about how important it was that we had this in science. So I think that obviously any awards and honours are really important, but actually the discussions that it starts afterwards are the most important part, whether that's with your family or you know, someone who's got it for services to boxing. There was a really cool guy who got it for services, and then I was like, I think I've got this for services to Wikipedia. but yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky.
Yeah, lucky, but also a great acknowledgement of the work that you've been doing, and you've been talking about how phenomenal those people are, but you are too, you know, in terms of getting that award and actually just raising that awareness is so important.
Yeah.
Okay, Jess, we'd like to finish each podcast with 3 or 4 take-home tips that the listeners could reflect on in terms of their own personal practice. So if you can give us some thoughts to reflect on in relation to your work, what would they be?
I think the first one and the most important one is to think about who you celebrate and champion around your home and in your teaching and in your science lab, or wherever you are and wherever you're listening to this. We all have choices in the stories that we tell, and we can all go out and find more diverse people to speak about. If you have a little bit of time, I'd really encourage you to learn how to edit Wikipedia, even if you don't want to write the whole profile of someone phenomenal. If you just want to correct a spelling mistake or make sure that the town you grew up in is better documented and reported on, I think that we have a really big responsibility, and we should recognise that if we use it as so much as a society, we should better contribute to make it more reflective of the one that we love and the one that we want it to be. And the last one is to really sit down and think, not only who can you talk about, but who could you put forward for something? Who could you be offering a bit of advice to? Who could you be a mentor for? Who do you need to make 10 minutes for after your lab group meeting to make sure that they're doing okay? And then to start helping those people. You know, we have got underrepresentation of women in senior leadership positions in science, but we've got lots and lots of undergraduate and postgraduate who'd really love those opportunities, but kind of lose confidence and feel like science isn't for them or academia isn't for them. So if you have the chance to do it or to change it in any capacity, I would encourage you to go out there and make that change happen.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks so much for your time today.
Don't worry.
So it was really good to hear from Jess Wade there. I'm sure you'll agree it was a really interesting conversation that we had. Just picking up on a couple of points that I learned a lot from that conversation. One of the things actually is that I edited Wikipedia once, not because I was trying to raise the profile of others, but that is something that is now available to me. But I actually edited Wikipedia because some of the facts around the birthplace of Reginald Mitchell, who was famous for inventing the Spitfire fighter plane, were incorrect. And I knew this because my sister happens to live in the house that he was born in and has the blue plaque on the front of the building.
That's brilliant. I love that. So yeah, I mean, the point you make there is about raising the profile of others, and that's something that really stood out from what Jess was saying, and that is really important, isn't it? That we get those facts correct, and then we work hard to raise people's profile in terms of other, younger generations being able to access that. She said something really nice, which was we need to get better at celebrating others. And I think that's really, really important. And that's something that I feel really strongly about, both within higher education and outside.
Yeah, definitely. Jess said around staff awards and just how having a simple statement on a nomination form to be mindful of things like equality and diversity made such a big impact in the representation of minority groups. And this obviously links to something that I'm really keen on, which is the nudge theory in there and how simple actions can result in actually big behaviour change.
Yeah, and we've got a podcast coming later in the series, haven't we, about nudge theory, where we explore that a little bit further.
Yeah.
Something that I thought was great about what Jess was talking about was that we all have choices for the stories that we tell. Well, just reflecting on that really provoked me to think about the stories that I tell in terms of working with teachers and also being a parent myself and inspiring the next generation, widening their horizons in terms of thinking about access to STEM for all. Well, lots of interesting things to think about from the podcast today. If you'd like to take your thinking further, we've added some further resources to the website specific to this podcast. So do access the reading list there. You can find it at liverpool.ac.uk/the-academy/podcast. And do let us know what you think about the episode. Please tweet us at LiveUniAcademy.
Or you can contact me directly on Twitter at eLearnerMatt, or I'm happy to continue the conversation on LinkedIn if you just search for Matthew Davis.
And I'm on Twitter as well at Alexandra_Owen.
Okay, great. So please rate and review in Apple Podcasts. Doing that really does help other people to find this podcast, or simply subscribe to the podcast via platforms such as Spotify, Google Podcasts, or even YouTube. Thanks very much. Bye for now.